Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to be here. It's an honor to be called a patron. It just blows my mind. I mean, use that expression, to be called a patron. You know, that's for old people. That's what I think. But then I'm 69, so there you go. I'm really pleased to be here, honored to do this, and I'm glad you called me a friend. And I'm also particularly glad, together with my professional colleagues, the ambassadors and the Consul General, to just say these few words of support to the choir. I'm going to be a little longer than you expect, but I'm also pleased my friends are here who are with me at university. I started in 1970 with them at a place called Antioch College in Ohio. And I was thinking that while they were teaching us about Aimé Césaire and the fight against decolonization, that in fact I was still in a colony in 1970, and we didn't become independent until 1973. So that was midway in the time we were at school. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but so we became an independent country 50 years ago. And I'm certain that I'm not going to be here 50 years from now. I'm pretty certain about that. So I wanted, in this 50th year, to do all that I could to mark this occasion for our country and for our people. And particularly since I remember standing next to Eric Wilmot on the one side and Cyril Stevenson on the other side on the night of independence in Nassau as the British flag went down and the Bahamian flag went up, and they were awash in tears. They couldn't, they just couldn't believe it. And I was thinking tonight or this afternoon about the role of tears, because Colin Powell, who used to be the Secretary of State, said on occasions like this he would always tear up. And of course, that's not the tradition of men in Western society. So he said what he would do is he would fix his face on someone far back in the crowd and keep speaking to that person in the back so he could avoid shedding the tears. But they are tears of joy for some very special occasions. And there was a little child I ran into in the island of San Salvador many years ago, and his parents were putting him on the plane, sending him off to Nassau. And of course, he was traveling by himself, and he was awash in tears because he was being left by himself. But I noticed as the plane took off that he was suddenly not crying anymore, but he was singing. Some song he'd been taught, he was singing, and music helped to calm him through the whole journey. And I was thinking again, as we think about what happened here this afternoon, how calming this all was for us to sit here and enjoy this music, largely by volunteers. And it's a real pity that the wider country was not able to see this and the work you put into doing this. So I'm trying to think what other opportunities we can create for this to happen. I know it takes a lot of logistics. And I remember on this occasion, Lee Callender, his wife Joanne, Franz Hepburn, and their effort when we were celebrating the 40th anniversary of our independence. And it was their idea to go around the world and have a concert which highlighted the musical traditions of the Bahamas. And that was my vision for this year. Sadly, it's not come off quite so much as I expected, but this really is what I had in mind, Ambassador, that we would be able to showcase all of this talent. And the young man who is at the piano, who you acknowledged as doing the arrangement, you said he's studying aviation, but he's also doing music. And well, aviation's an honorable profession. But you know, I remember my friend Winston Saunders, and if I could speak about him having passed, that I think the great tragedy of his life was he was a brilliant musician who didn't want to be a lawyer or to be anything else but a musician and an artist. but he came along in an era when it just wasn't possible. And I think that that very much destroyed the quality of his life as much as he gave to the country. The fact that he could not actually be what he wanted to be, was an artist. And I look at the hairstyles that everybody wears here, the men and the women, and how everybody's dressed. And I remember coming home from university with my hair in braids in the 1970s, and my mother was just beside herself. You know, this is just not acceptable. And now we are 50 years later. People's life, their lifestyles, their conduct is generally accepted in a more tolerant society. And that has happened in 50 years. So we've got some ways to go. I'm glad Mr. Delaney is here because I remember his wife, and I'm sure she would have loved this evening to be here, and I'm happy that you were able to contribute to this and support this. So kudos to you for having done this. It's our privilege and honor in the foreign ministry, on behalf of our ambassadors, on behalf of the Consul General, to be here, to share the tears, to share the smiles and the laughter, and to think about a wonderful country with warts and all that has provided us with a platform to the world. Who's it? You think of the athletes. You were talking about the Olympics, and Sidney Poitier, who in 1973, he was, as I remember it, the last person to arrive on the evening before the ceremonies began. And those of you who know Clifford Park will know that you start from the west because there's a ramp which brings you onto the park. So it's very late, and he's late getting there, and he's walking around the edge of the parade, slowly making his way to the platform. And as he's going, because he's at the height of his popularity then, people are cheering as he's walking by. And I thought to myself, this fellow is just, you know, taking advantage of this big crowd and making the grand entrance. I spoke to him about it many, many years later, and he said, the truth is, that night I was lost. Nobody told me where to go. So I was just making my way to the light. So that's a light moment from our independence. But I hope that you remember this occasion. And if you're here from 50 years from now, remember me. And God bless you, and thank you all. A wonderful evening, and I shall tell the Prime Minister what a wonderful, wonderful afternoon this was. And let's hope we can repeat it again soon. Bless you.
Again, we would like to thank you for coming out. We are grateful to Consulate Office